"Don't let her near him. He'll take her hand off." Those were the first words Corporal Yates said when he walked through the door of the Rideau Valley Animal Hospital that Tuesday morning. Not hello, not good morning, not even a nod to the receptionist who had held the door open for him. Just that warning, flat and certain, delivered to the room like a man who expected to be obeyed. The dog at the end of his lead was a Belgian Malinois named Ghost, 90 pounds of muscle and scar tissue, one ear slightly torn at the tip from something nobody in the waiting room wanted to imagine. He moved the way working dogs move, low, deliberate, every sense tuned outward. His eyes swept the room once and then fixed on the far wall like he was already planning his exit. Lori Adesso had seen difficult dogs before. She had been a registered veterinary technician for 6 years, the last 3 of them at Rideau Valley, and in that time she had been bitten twice, scratched more times than she could count, and had once spent 40 minutes on the floor of an exam room talking a terrified Great Dane out from under the sink. She was not easily rattled, but she felt the shift in the room the moment Corporal Yates walked in. The other clients, a woman with a tabby and a carrier, an older man with a beagle on his lap, both went quiet. The receptionist, Meg, smiled her professional smile and started typing faster than necessary. Even the overhead radio, which had been playing something soft and forgettable, seemed to fade into the background. Yates was not a large man, but he carried himself like one. Mid-30s, jaw set, in civilian clothes, but wearing them the way military men often wore civilian clothes, like a uniform he hadn't quite adjusted to. His posture said he was used to being the most capable person in any given room and had stopped bothering to hide it. Ghost sat at his heel without being told. Lori came out from behind the triage desk with a clipboard. Standard intake. Weight, symptoms, reason for visit. She had done it 1,000 times. "Hi there, I'm Lori, one of the RVTs here. Can I get some information on?" "He doesn't like strangers." Yates didn't look at her. He was scanning the room, cataloging exits, the way she had noticed certain clients do. The ones who had spent time in places where that habit kept you alive. "He's been off his food for 4 days and he's favoring his left foreleg." "That's it. I'd prefer to wait for the vet." "Of course. Dr. Oduya will be with you shortly. I just need to. I'll fill it out myself." He reached for the clipboard. She let him take it. Not because she was intimidated, or not only that, but because she had learned a long time ago that some people needed to feel in control of something, and a clipboard was a small price to pay for a calmer appointment. She went back to the desk. Meg raised her eyebrows a millimeter. Lori gave the smallest possible shrug in return. From across the room, she watched Ghost. He was sitting perfectly still, which on a dog like that was almost more unsettling than agitation would have been. His eyes tracked every movement in the room, but when they passed over Lori, they paused. Just for a second. Then moved on. She noticed he was favoring the left foreleg, exactly as Yates had said. But there was something else. A tension around the eyes. A flatness to the ears that wasn't dominance and wasn't fear. It was something she had seen in animals that were hurting in more than one place at once and had been hurting long enough that they'd stopped expecting it to stop. Yates finished the intake form and set it on the edge of the desk without looking at her. She picked it up, read it carefully. Ghost, 5 years old, military working dog, retired 6 months ago, currently under the care of Corporal D. Yates, handler, presenting complaint, reduced appetite, intermittent lameness left foreleg. Last veterinary visit, 8 months ago. 8 months. For a dog that had been on active duty, she did the math quietly and said nothing. Dr. Oduya came in 12 minutes later, which was fast for a Tuesday. She was a compact woman in her 50s who had grown up in Lagos and gone to vet school in Guelph, and had, over the course of her career, developed the particular talent of making both animals and their humans feel like everything was going to be fine without saying anything that wasn't true. She greeted Yates, shook his hand, crouched slightly to look at Ghost without reaching for him. "He'll let me approach if you give him the command," Yates said. "Otherwise don't. Understood." Dr. Oduya straightened up and nodded at Lori. "Can you assist, please?" Lori came around to the exam side. She stood about 6 feet from Ghost, just inside his peripheral vision, and waited. Yates gave Ghost a single hand signal, palm down, then a slow rotation. The dog's posture shifted, almost imperceptibly. Not relaxed, but permissive. Dr. Oduya began her examination. Ghost allowed it, barely. His muscles stayed rigid under her hands. When she touched the foreleg, he turned his head and showed his teeth, not a snap but a warning, clear and calibrated as a traffic light going yellow. Easy, Yates said, low and automatic. Ghost held. Lori had moved without thinking, not closer, sideways, to the edge of Ghost's sight line, positioning herself so that if he did go for Dr. Oduya, she could intervene with the least possible chaos. It was a thing you learned to do without announcing it. What she didn't expect was for Ghost to look at her. Not the room-scanning look from before. This was direct, sustained. The kind of eye contact that in a working dog meant something. She held very still and met his gaze. His ears moved, not back, not aggressive. Something else. Like a question. There's a significant soft tissue injury here, Dr. Oduya was saying, her hand still moving carefully over the leg. And I'm feeling some heat in the shoulder joint as well. I'd like to get radiographs. How long has he been showing this? The limp started about 3 weeks ago. Yates's voice had shifted slightly, still controlled, but the certainty had thinned a little at the edges. I thought it might resolve. Has he been sleeping normally? Any changes in behavior? A pause. He's quieter than he used to be. Dr. Oduya nodded. I'd like to keep him for a couple of hours. Get the images, run some blood work. Is that possible? Another pause, longer. He doesn't do well separated. We'll keep the stress minimal. Lori will be with him the whole time. Yates looked at Lori for the first time since he'd handed her the clipboard. It wasn't a hostile look exactly. It was an assessing one. The look of someone who had spent years evaluating who was competent and who wasn't, and who had not yet made up his mind about her. He'll shut down, he said. Without me there, he won't cooperate. Okay. Lori said it simply, not arguing, not reassuring. Then why don't you wait in the room with him while I get the equipment set up? You can stay until we're ready to go, and then we'll see how he does. Yates studied her. You've worked with working dogs before? Some. Mostly I've worked with dogs that are scared. She looked at Ghost, who was still watching her. It's not always that different. Yates didn't say anything. But he didn't say no either. The radiograph suite was in the back, past the treatment room and the recovery ward. Lori moved through the prep with the efficient quiet she'd developed over years of working in spaces where noise was a liability. Drawers opened and closed softly. Equipment arranged before it was needed. Nothing dropped, nothing rushed. Ghost came in with Yates. He stood in the center of the room and assessed it the way he had assessed the waiting room, systematically, without visible anxiety but without ease either. Lori moved to the far counter and began calibrating the equipment without looking at him directly, letting him do his survey. You're doing it on purpose, Yates said. She glanced up. What? Not looking at him. He was watching her. That's a technique. Yes! Where'd you learn that? Trial and error. She finished the calibration and turned around slowly, keeping her movements predictable. Mostly the error part. Something shifted in Yates's expression. Not quite a smile, more like the idea of one considered and set aside. Ghost had taken 2 steps in her direction. Neither of them acknowledged it. He was in Kandahar, Yates said. Not offering it, more like a thing that had come loose on its own. 2 tours. He found a lot of things. Things that would have, he stopped, started. He's good at his job. I can see that, Lori said. He retired because his handler got killed. The words came out flat and even, which she recognized as the voice people used when they were saying something that cost them something. ID'd, last November. I was the backup handler. I got him after. A beat. He hasn't been right since. Lori was quiet for a moment. Is he eating anything at all? She asked. Enough to not worry me. Not enough to feel like it means anything to him. Does he sleep? He wakes up a lot. Yates looked at the dog. I wake up a lot too. We mostly just sit in the kitchen. She didn't say she was sorry, because it wasn't what the moment needed. She said, does he have a toy he carries around? Anything he's attached to? The question surprised him. Yeah, a Kong. Green one. He carries it from room to room. He doesn't play with it. They do that, she said. When they're grieving, they carry things. Yates was very still. Dogs grieve, she said, not explaining, just saying it out loud in case it helped. They don't do it the way we do, but they do it. He lost his person. And then everything changed. New handler, new place, new routines, his whole world restructured. That's a lot for any animal. For one as intelligent as him, it's a lot more. Ghost was now standing 2 feet from her. She still hadn't looked directly at him. You can touch him, Yates said, and his voice had changed, not softer exactly, more open. Like a window that had been shut for a long time, cracked an inch. I'll wait until he decides, she said. 40 seconds later, Ghost pressed his nose to the back of her hand. She let him. Didn't move, didn't make a sound. Let him take his time with whatever information he needed from her. His nose worked along her wrist, up her forearm to the inside of her elbow, and then he pulled back and sat down directly in front of her and looked up at her face. From behind her, she heard Yates make a sound she didn't have a word for. Not a gasp, not a word. Something between the two. He hasn't done that, Yates said, with anyone. Since November, the radiographs took about 40 minutes. Ghost tolerated them with Laurie's hands resting lightly on him, not restraining, just present, the way you might rest your hand on a friend's arm in a waiting room before bad news. Yates stayed in the doorway. He answered her questions when she asked them, short and accurate, the way someone gives a report. What had started as a transactional appointment had become something else. She knew better than to name it. The images came through and Dr. Oduya reviewed them with Laurie, while Yates sat on the low bench in the treatment room with Ghost's head in his lap, not saying anything, one hand moving slowly behind the dog's torn ear. Partial tear supraspinatus tendon, Dr. Oduya said quietly. Probably been building for months. Manageable, but it needs proper treatment. Rest, physio, possibly a referral to the ortho vet in Canada. She paused, looking at the screen. He's also slightly underweight, and his cortisol levels are going to come back high, I'd bet on it. The lameness is physical, Laurie said. But the rest of it is grief and stress and whatever he's been carrying since Kandahar. Dr. Oduya took off her reading glasses. I've seen it before. In police dogs, in search and rescue dogs. When a working dog loses their primary bond, it can be very hard to come back from. Can they? Sometimes. She looked at the doorway, toward the treatment room. With the right support. Yates was still on the bench when Laurie came back in. Ghost lifted his head, saw her, and lowered it back to Yates's knee, but his tail moved. Just once, a single slow sweep. Dr. Oduya will be in to go over the results in a minute, she said. But the short version is, the leg is treatable. The rest of it is going to take time. How much time? I don't know. Every dog is different. She paused. He chose you too, you know. Yates looked up. After his handler died, they could have retired him with anyone, or kept him in the program. But he ended up with you. She said it simply, not sentimental. He's still here. He's still getting up in the morning. That's something. Yates looked down at Ghost. The dog's eyes were closed now, one ear twitching slightly at the sound of the ventilation system. I didn't know if I was doing right by him, Yates said. It came out quietly, like he hadn't meant to say it quite so plainly. You brought him in, she said. That counts. There was a follow-up appointment 2 weeks later. Ghost came through the door of Rideau Valley Animal Hospital and crossed the waiting room without looking at the exits. He walked to the desk where Laurie was standing and sat down in front of it and waited, as if he had decided this was simply where appointments began now. The green Kong was in his mouth. Yates came through the door behind him, stopped, took in the scene. He carried it the whole way from the truck, he said. Laurie came around the desk and crouched down to Ghost's level. The dog set the Kong down on the linoleum between them, looked at her. Is this for me? She asked. Ghost pushed it forward with his nose. She heard Yates exhale from somewhere behind her, a long, careful breath, the kind you let out when something you had been holding for a long time finally loosens its grip. She picked up the Kong. It was worn smooth in the places a dog's mouth goes when he carries a thing everywhere, every day, for months. Thank you, she said to Ghost, very seriously. He put his head under her hand. And just like that, in the waiting room of an ordinary animal hospital in Ottawa on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, with the tabby in the carrier watching from the corner and the overhead radio playing something soft and forgettable, something that had been broken for a long time took one small, deliberate step toward whole.